Hey team, we're back this week. Second week, we're going to talk about injury prevention. I'm here with Dave Qualman. He's an athletic trainer that I work with, and so he's going to help kind of moderate and add to the discussion over time. But this was the second or the most requested topic, actually, that was brought up whenever I polled the athletes that I work with on what they want to learn more about. And so multiple athletes requested specifically injury prevention. So we're going to chat on that today. So we have a few points we're going to get to. Before we get into those points, I kind of have a rant that I want to go off on, and I know Dave shares this mindset, and so I know he has thoughts as well, but the whole idea behind injury prevention is a challenging one because essentially what you're teaching an athlete, if you as a coach tell an athlete that these exercises are injury prevention exercises, what that is telling the athlete is that if you do these things, you will prevent injury. And that, right off the bat, is hard for me to wrap my head around because the world is a chaotic place and there's nothing that you can do to protect yourself except sit in bed and never leave your bed the entire time. Like, things will happen, accidents happen, and sport is a chaotic environment. And so there's no specific thing you can do that you should be labeling injury prevention. And I guess a follow-up of that is that we don't want you training with the mindset of what I am doing is to prevent injury. What we want you to think of is what I'm doing is preparing me and making me better and building my body up and propelling me towards something even better. So like that kind of mindset is very different from a cautious mindset of I'm doing this to make sure I don't get hurt. And it's the same in sport. In ski racing, for example, you're not skiing to just finish, you're skiing to win. So you're pushing hard and you're trying to get to the finish line instead of saying, oh, I just want to slowly get through this and make sure I'm safe. And do you have any thoughts on that before I could keep going forever?
Yeah, I think the way we think about it is we're implement things and exercises and programs to reduce the likelihood of injury or reduce the risk factors that are inherent to the sport. But the athlete should just think about it as their training. It's what they're doing. It's their program, their strength program, their power program, whatever. And we, maybe cue them or include things that are going to help kind of bulletproof them a little bit. But we're not doing anything to, magic thing that's going to prevent an injury. We're building them up into athletes, into, strong people so they can go do their sport and have a lower likelihood of getting injured. But yeah, the idea of injury prevention is just kind of silly.
Yeah. So, and I guess the thing that we discuss and we kind of talk about is that a well-developed, robust, a fully developed athletic development program is your injury prevention. And we're not going to call it that, but if you have a well thought out and programmed and progressed training system or periodization plan, that is going to be the best thing that you can do. And actually research shows that. So there's been a meta-analysis, so a collection of a lot of different studies, all of which are trying to identify this magic thing that prevents injury. And the only conclusive thing that came out of looking at all these studies is that strength training reduces the likelihood of injury and everything else doesn't statistically make a difference. And there are specific instances, and we'll get into this in a little bit, but there are specific things at times that you can do that will help you. But as a broad paint stroke, or stroke the paintbrush, like a broad stroke, strength training is the most likely thing to reduce injury. And that's it. And I think that's interesting. And it kind of goes back to what I was talking about last week of you'll see a lot of ads and a lot of things on social media, people trying to sell you things and tell you that it prevents injury because there's so much money in that. And I don't remember what podcast it was, but this guy talked about the idea that there's a lot of money in telling people that they're broken and that they need this to fix themselves. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've noticed that trend, but it's...
Yeah. I mean, it's not like a catchy or like magical thing. You just need to get strong.
Yeah.
It's not like there's something you should be doing or taking or, some specific group of exercises. Like, just have a good strength program, get strong, and it'll make you better at what you do.
Yeah, and it sucks because that's not sexy.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's boring, and it's like
boring.
putting in hard work and doing that consistently. Nobody wants to buy that. What people want to buy is do this thing and you will not get hurt, or do this thing and you'll lose weight, or do this thing and you'll gain 15 pounds of muscle in 6 days. Like, that's what people want.
Yeah.
And I think that's why naturally as humans we're drawn to those things that say they're going to fix X, Y, and Z, because something inside of us wants that quick fix. And we know that putting in work is a lot of work. It takes a long time, and naturally, if there is a shorter, easier answer, you want to do that. But the reality is the shorter, quick fixes actually don't fix anything and can even cause more harm, especially if they change your mindset around the training. But I will say there are things that can help predict injury. And so these are the things we do want to pay attention to. I wouldn't classify these things as injury prevention because it's not a guarantee, but what you're looking at with a predictor is if there's something you can do about reducing likelihood, I guess, that's something that you want to do. And so the first thing that we discuss is past injury. And I think that that's often overlooked, and a lot of people rehab different ways, and I might just throw this one right back at you, but past injury is a major predictor of future injury for a lot of different reasons that Dave's going to talk about now.
Yeah, so one of the huge things we look at, for example, after like an ACL injury is we always want to protect that healing surgical knee, but what we find is you're just as likely to tear your other ACL as your surgically repaired one. So when Bing's, doing these strength programs and running you guys through exercises, we're looking at a lot of different things. And another risk factor for a second ACL injury is what your opposite hip is doing. And if your opposite hip is rotating in or your knee's dropping in, that's a huge risk factor for tearing your ACL again. So, and like Bing was saying, we don't do these things to prevent injuries, but if we see something mechanically that isn't clean or can be improved, then we just cue you guys to improve those and watch out for them, because we know that if you have good mechanics and you don't favor a leg, then you're more likely to have a successful recovery and not tear your ACL again or tear an ACL in the initial time.
Yeah, and that goes a lot into asymmetry.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times when you come back from injury, especially general population that just go to, I don't want to say that physical therapy or athletic training outside of a high performance setting is of lesser quality, but the idea is that when you're in a high performance setting, you're trying to get an athlete back to an elite sport, whereas in the general population setting, you're just trying to get someone healthy to where they can function and they're not going to, or they're able to walk around the house and not have pain. And that's the end goal. And so a lot of times you spend a significant amount of time rehabbing your affected leg, or the leg that you had surgery on, or the knee, the side that you had surgery on. And sometimes after rehab, you come back stronger, usually you come back stronger on your affected side than on your unaffected side. And so that in itself is an asymmetry. But for general population, they're not really worried about that. They just say, hey, we've got this leg back, it's in great shape, you're good to go. And for most people, you are good to go. But if you're performing at a high level in sport, now you have this imbalance where your rehabbing leg is stronger, and then you have an asymmetry, and that's kind of what Dave was talking about. You get into this situation where you're relying on one leg more heavily than the other, or the power production capabilities or force production capabilities are different between legs, which increases that risk for injury.